Hey there, friends. Interesting news on this Friday afternoon. Very interesting, actually. Just a few minutes ago, Trump issued an executive order. Not that we needed it, because the Second Amendment has been in place for a very long time, 1791 to be exact. But the White House's executive order states protecting Second Amendment rights. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby order. Section 1, purpose. The Second Amendment is an indispensable safeguard of security and liberty. It has preserved the right of the American people to protect ourselves, our families, and our freedoms since the founding of our great nation. Because it is foundational to maintaining all of the rights held by Americans, the right to keep and bear arms must not be infringed. Section 2, plan of action. Within 30 days of the date of this order, the Attorney General shall examine all orders, regulations, guidance, plans, international agreements, and other actions of executive departments and agencies to assess any ongoing infringements of the Second Amendment rights of our citizens and present a proposed plan of action to the President through the Domestic Policy Advisor to protect the Second Amendment rights of all Americans. B. In developing such proposed plan of action, the Attorney General shall review, at a minimum, all presidential and agencies' actions from January 2021, this is the beginning of the Biden administration, obviously, through January 2025, that purport to promote safety but may have impinged on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. Well, this is interesting because we know there are a lot of things out there that they did, but the Bipartisan Safer Community Act, just I like to remind everybody, is law. However, a lot of the other things that he was doing, and I think a lot of this is pointing back at the ATF, was the zero tolerance policies of the ATF, where they were putting mom and pops out of business and things like that. So interesting that he's very specific about some of these things, and I like the fact that he is mocking them, and rightfully so, where they purport to promote safety, but have definitely not done so. Rules promulgated by the Department of Justice, including by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosives from January 2021 to January 25, pertaining to firearms and/or federal firearms licensees. There again, pointing at the FFLs that have been abused. Agencies' plans, orders, and actions regarding the so-called enhanced regulatory enforcement policy pertaining to firearms and/or federal firearms licensees. Reports and related documents issued by the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And again, remember, that Office of Gun Violence Prevention no longer exists. They already disbanded that. The positions taken by the United States in any and all ongoing or potential litigation that affects or could affect the ability of Americans to exercise their Second Amendment rights, agencies' classifications of firearms and ammunition, and the processing of applications to make, manufacture, transfer, or export firearms. Now, that one prior to it, where it says ongoing potential litigation that affects or could affect the ability of Americans to exercise their Second Amendment rights, that may affect suppressors, possibly in a good way, certainly affects any of the silly little bump stocks. A lot of this stuff's already been litigated, remember that, by GOA and some of the other people out there. But the force reset triggers, all that stuff is pretty much what he's pointing at here. And of course, that one where it says classification of firearms and ammunition and the processing of applications to make, manufacture, transfer, or export firearms, that's really important. You remember Joe Biden made changes that affected the export to other countries that they deemed off limits based on their list, their own list, and actually put some of these businesses, these import-export businesses, out of business. So I think that's a big deal to reverse. I'd actually heard at SHOT Show a lot of people talking about this, stating that that hadn't been addressed, and they wondered why. Well, it's addressed right here. So I think that's a big deal. Section 3, implementation. Upon submission of the proposed plan of action described in Section 2 of this order, the Attorney General shall work with the Domestic Policy Advisor to finalize a plan of action and establish a process for implementation. I think it's important that we also note here, and let's see if there's a change of heart. It may be a quiet change of heart. But Pam Bondi and Donald Trump have talked about red flag gun laws. Donald Trump by saying, take the guns, worry about due process later. And Pam Bondi was instrumental in the state of Florida of enacting those red flag gun laws. So let's see if they have quietly heard the voices of the people who put them back into office. That's a big one for me. I mean, they correct that, and that corrects a whole lot of what they've gotten wrong in the past. Section 4, general provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to an executive department, agency, or the head thereof, or the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary administration or legislative proposals. That's making sure that they are going to control the purse strings throughout this process. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law, or inequity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. While there are some ambiguities in there, it's done on purpose, just like anytime you're writing a bill or a law, you create those ambiguities so that you can, let's be honest here, figure them out along the way. And they're going to figure some of this out along the way. Again, their actions are going to mean something once they start to implement what they're talking about here. Does this really mean anything? Well, if nothing else, it means that the Second Amendment is on their radar, right? This doesn't change anything. Nothing changes Monday morning or tomorrow morning based on this executive order. But again, I think that it does shine a light on the very fact that all these other things they're working on with DOGE and all that good stuff, they haven't forgotten that the Second Amendment is important to us. And at least this means that this is front of mind to them. Because we're only a couple of weeks in to Donald Trump's presidency, and we're already talking about the Second Amendment. I think that's huge. I really do. If nothing else, the signal this sends is massive to me. Because it would be easy for them to know, oh, we got elected, we got 4 years, and then not put any eyeballs on the Second Amendment or not even throw us a bone. And I don't think this is just a bone. I think they're serious about this because they spent time putting this together, and obviously they've got some things that triggered some of the sections that they put in here based on what the Biden administration has already done to abuse any authority that they thought they had in the past. Now, ATF director, all those things coming up. Let me just say this real quick. The acting ATF director right now, because Dettelbach tucked tail and ran so he could protect his pension before he was fired, the acting ATF director is Marvin Richardson. You know who my boy Richardson is, right? I've talked about this years ago, and now he's back. He was actually the acting director during Trump's previous administration. So he's back now as the acting director. Marvin Richardson actually got an award for burning down Waco and burning all those children and women just because they thought somebody had machine guns, right? The massacre at Waco, Marvin was directly involved in it, and Marvin got a plaque on his wall and an award saying, "Good job at Waco, Marvin." So that's got to change as well. I'm not happy with the fact that we have that clown back in there as an acting director. It's time to get a legitimate director in there that the Second Amendment advocacy group as a whole, the whole movement, can get behind. And actually, the best news would be we don't need an ATF director because we got rid of the whole damn organization. Anyway, guys, I think this is good news heading into the weekend, so have a great weekend.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. He's so horrible.